Black CEO, told to wait outside. 7 minutes later, she fired the entire team on the spot. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Get out, now. People like you don't belong on this floor. The words didn't just echo, they hit the marble walls like a slap wrapped in authority. For a split second, even the scrolling numbers on the trading screen seemed to hesitate, freezing mid-flicker as if the entire financial district stopped to listen. The woman who spit out those words, a manager in a sharp gray suit, stood inches from Zaya Watkins, her finger stabbing the air with the precision of someone who had practiced this gesture more times than she'd admit. Her voice wasn't just loud. It was designed to carry, designed to humiliate, designed to draw blood in the most public way possible. Around them, the grand lobby of Meridian Financial glittered with cold efficiency, a cathedral of wealth and numbers. Gleaming floors, towering glass walls, screens screaming stock prices. But in that moment, all of it blurred behind the spectacle forming at the center of the room. Zaya didn't move. In her cream-white suit, tailored to a kind of quiet perfection that needed no logo, no spectacle, she looked almost out of place in the storm gathering around her, not because she didn't belong, but because she didn't belong in their idea of what power should look like. A security guard stepped forward, his palm slightly raised, an unspoken command tightening the air. Behind him, a senior manager, arms folded, face carved from smug certainty, watched the scene with the calm of a spectator who believed the ending was already written. And then the phones came up. 1, then 4 more. Then the entire left side of the lobby lit up with screens, employees recording the moment like it was office entertainment, not a public execution. Their lenses gleamed like small, predatory eyes. A woman near the back even nudged her colleague, whispering something with a cruel little smile before angling her phone higher. The female manager took another step toward Zaya. "I said out," she snapped, her voice sharpening. "This area is restricted to executives and approved personnel, not whoever you think you are." A few giggles slipped from the cluster of employees, pretending they weren't watching. The security guard's posture stiffened with the false confidence that comes from blindly enforcing someone else's prejudice. Still, Zaya didn't move. Her gaze didn't rise, didn't fall, didn't flinch. If anything, the stillness of her expression was starting to bend the atmosphere in ways the crowd couldn't yet name. The quiet around her gathered weight, pressing outward until even the boldest onlookers began to shift their feet. The manager noticed the shift, mistook it for hesitation in her audience, and doubled down. "You heard me. Leave. Now, before you disrupt something of actual value." This time the insult landed harder, not because of the words themselves, but because of the absolute conviction behind them. She believed every syllable. She believed she was right. She believed the woman in white was small, disposable, a mistake in the pristine order of her corporate universe. Zaya raised her head at last. Just a fraction, just enough for the overhead lights to catch the edge of her cheekbone, the calm in her eyes, the steadiness of a person who had endured far worse than this. And somehow, that tiny movement made the room's temperature dip. The back row stopped laughing. The security guard's hand hovered, suddenly unsure whether to touch her or retreat. The manager didn't notice any of it. She was too busy performing for the crowd, gesturing dramatically at the exit as if she were the guardian of some sacred gate. "Security!" she barked. "Escort her out immediately. She has no right to be in this building." The guard stepped closer. The phones zoomed in. The silent crowd leaned forward. But Zaya simply adjusted the black leather briefcase at her side, the one monogrammed Z.W. in quiet gold, and exhaled once, so softly it barely stirred the air. And that was when the first tremor of unease cracked through the room. Not a sound, not a word. A shift, subtle but undeniable, like the moment before a chandelier stops shimmering. The manager opened her mouth again, ready to escalate, ready to make the humiliation complete. But before she could speak, the narrator in your mind, my voice slides in, calm, cinematic, deliberate. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. The manager leaned in, her voice dripping disdain. You're wasting everyone's time. People like you, she hissed, don't get to walk these halls. And that was it. The last ignorant, arrogant mistake she would make today, because the woman she was trying to throw out wasn't just some visitor, some outsider, some forgettable inconvenience. She was the one person in this entire building who didn't need permission. And in exactly 7 minutes, every single person standing against her would learn that truth the hard way. The trading floor regained its noise, but not its confidence. A thin, uneasy tremor rippled through the atrium, like the building itself sensed something the people inside it were too arrogant to notice. The overhead lights hummed faintly. The scrolling tickers resumed their frantic dance. Yet the energy had changed, not loud, not visible, but undeniable. It began with the security guard. His outstretched hand hovered in midair, fingers inches from Zaya's arm, and for reasons he couldn't articulate, he hesitated. A moment earlier, he had been ready to escort her out without question. Now his stance wavered, weight shifting between his heels, instinct tugging at him like a quiet warning. Don't touch her. He cleared his throat, dropping his hand a fraction. It was subtle, but in a room trained to read market signals, subtlety was everything. The manager didn't see it. She was too busy savoring the attention. But the employees did. Phones stayed raised, yet their expressions flickered curiosity, confusion, something that looked uncomfortably close to doubt. A young analyst in the back lowered her camera completely, suddenly aware of how wrong this scene felt. The cruelty no longer looked entertaining, it looked excessive. Zaya hadn't moved an inch. The stillness around her created pressure, slow and tidal, bending the emotional temperature of the room. It was as if she was the only stable point in a space wobbling under its own false certainty. Even the air felt different, colder, heavier, like the moment before a glass shatters. The senior officer, arms crossed, shifted his jaw. "What's the holdup?" he muttered, irritation threading his voice. "Just remove her." But the guard didn't advance. His voice came out low. "Sir, are we sure?" The manager cut in sharply. "Yes, we are sure. She shouldn't be in this area. None of this is complicated." But it was complicated, she just didn't know it yet. Because the shift wasn't coming from the security guard or the onlookers, it was coming from above. On the mezzanine level, overlooking the atrium, 3 individuals in dark suits stepped into view, discreet yet deliberate. They weren't employees of Meridian Financial. Their badges weren't the standard silver rectangles. Their steps weren't hurried but measured, synchronized, purposeful. They carried the kind of quiet authority that didn't need to announce itself. Only a few employees noticed them at first, but those who did felt something icy roll down their spines. One whispered, "Who are they?" Another replied, "I've never seen those badges before." A third added, "Why are they coming down here?" Zaya heard all of it, the whispers, the shifting breaths, the creeping awareness, but her eyes stayed fixed on the woman in front of her. There was no gloating, no triumph, only a steady clarity that unnerved more than anger ever could. The manager mistook the silence as victory. "Good," she said, straightening her blazer. "Security, let's do this properly. Escort her out the front. Make sure everyone sees we maintain standards here." Her voice filled the lobby with false pride. But above them, the trio of executives reached the final step. The one in the center lifted a tablet. A glowing notification pulsed on the screen, the signal Zaya had sent 2 minutes earlier. A protocol had been activated. A protocol only one person on record had the authority to initiate. And that person was standing in white at the center of this marble storm. The senior officer finally noticed the approaching figures. His arms dropped, his eyes narrowed. Wait, who exactly requested internal oversight today? No one answered. Because the answer was walking toward them. The employees watched with widening eyes as the trio descended into the atrium's light, scanning the room, heading straight toward the confrontation as if pulled by gravity. The tension thickened. The manager felt it at last, the first crack in her certainty. She turned slightly, catching movement from the corner of her eye. "What now?" she muttered, annoyed. She didn't realize it yet, but the next 5 minutes would rewrite her entire career. The atmosphere had shifted. The balance of power had shifted. The story, without a word spoken, had already chosen its winner. And it wasn't her. From the mezzanine, the trio in dark suits moved with a coordination that didn't belong to ordinary corporate staff. They descended like a quiet verdict, each step measured, each expression indecipherable. The room shifted again, the way a market shifts before a crash. Subtly at first, then unmistakably. But while every eye followed them, no one noticed the most important detail. Zaya did not turn to look. She didn't need to. She knew exactly who they were. Because they were responding to her. For the first time, a flicker of awareness rippled through the crowd. This wasn't normal oversight. This wasn't a routine compliance check. Someone had triggered a level of internal authority far above the pay grade of everyone standing in that atrium. The senior officer uncrossed his arms, unease crawling beneath his businesslike exterior. "Why is corporate security here?" he muttered. A junior analyst whispered back, "That's not corporate security. Their badges are gold." "Gold? Only one person's team wears those?" But before the realization could land, the camera of the moment cut sharply inward into the story of the woman still standing in perfect composure at the center of the storm. Zaya Watkins. The name meant nothing to the people surrounding her, but outside these walls it meant everything. 23 years earlier, Zaya was a young analyst with a second-hand laptop, a cracked Metro card, and a brain built for patterns no one else could see. She lived in a studio apartment so small the shower steam fogged the windows of the entire place. She didn't have connections. She didn't have a pedigree. What she had was precision, the ability to see risk before it existed and potential before it bloomed. She built her first fund on a kitchen counter, stacked with unpaid bills. She grew it during nights when she fell asleep on financial reports, when the only light in her apartment was the glow of her monitor and the street lamps outside flickering like threats. She learned the markets not from mentors, not from legacy, but from hunger, the kind of hunger that turns discipline into instinct. Her breakthrough came at 32. She made a call no one else dared to make, pulling out of a tech merger hours before it collapsed. People called it luck. They said it was a fluke, until she did it again. And again, and again, calling economic storms before they hit, restructuring failing giants from the inside out, reviving portfolios others had declared dead. By 40, she wasn't merely successful. She was a ghost in the upper architecture of American finance, the kind of invisible power that didn't need press releases, didn't need applause, the kind of power that rewired entire sectors from behind a closed door. And now, at 45, she held the controlling interest in Meridian Financial, the very company whose atrium she was standing in. 38% ownership acquired quietly through layered subsidiaries, private holdings, and strategic buy-ins so discreet that most of the people working here didn't even know who truly signed their paychecks. She had come today unannounced, not for drama, but for truth, to see how employees treated someone they didn't think mattered. She'd done this before in other firms, a quiet audit of character, culture, and conscience. And every time she had learned something new about the people who served under her leadership. But today, she learned something uglier, something revealing, something that had consequences. Not because their insults hurt her, they didn't, but because they revealed a rot inside the company she now owned. And rot, in her world, was not something you ignored. It was something you cut out. Back in the atrium, the trio of executives finally reached the marble floor. One of them opened a secure tablet. On the screen, a protocol pulsed under Zaya's authorization code, integrity review, executive tier immediate action required. The senior officer's breath caught. The manager blinked, confused. The guard stepped back entirely, instinctively recognizing the hierarchy shift. Zaya finally lifted her gaze to the trio. One nod, small, imperceptible to anyone who wasn't looking. They nodded back. That was all it took. Because now the room was seconds away from learning the truth. The woman they had tried to push out was the one who had the power to remove all of them. For a moment, the atrium felt like a stage caught between acts, the kind where the audience senses something has gone wrong long before the actors do. The trio in dark suits stood waiting, silent and immovable, their presence bending the air like gravity. But the only person who hadn't registered the shift was the one who should have sensed it first, the manager. She straightened her blazer, oblivious to the tension spreading through the room like a slow leak. "Well," she snapped at the guard, "are you going to remove her or not?" Her voice carried the confidence of someone who had never once been challenged in her own domain. Someone who believed her authority was inherent, unquestionable, ordained by position and pedigree. She didn't notice the guard lower his gaze, or the senior officer's stiffening jaw, or the whisper of uncertainty circulating among the employees holding their phones. She didn't see the trio of high-level operatives watching her with unreadable expressions. She didn't see anything except the target she was determined to expel. And that blindness, that arrogance, was her fatal mistake. She stepped toward Zaya again, heels striking marble with angry precision. "You're still here?" she scoffed. "You must really enjoy embarrassing yourself. Let me make this simple. You are not authorized to be on this floor. You don't belong here. And I don't care what excuse you think you have." Nearby, one of the analysts winced. Another whispered, "She should stop talking." A third replied, "She won't." Zaya remained still, hands relaxed at her sides, the briefcase's black leather reflecting the soft glow of the overhead lights. Her silence was no longer passive. It felt deliberate, purposeful, like she was giving the room a chance to correct itself before she intervened. But the manager mistook it for weakness. They always did. "This department handles sensitive financial operations," she continued loudly, projecting her voice for the crowd. "And we don't tolerate disruptions or wandering visitors. So let me be extremely clear. You are one step away from being physically escorted out." Her eyes narrowed. "And if you resist, that's on you." The trio in dark suits exchanged a subtle glance. The senior officer took a step forward. "Paula," he murmured, voice low, "maybe we should pause." "Pause?" She laughed. "For what?" "I'm doing my job." "No," he said quietly. "You're making an assumption." She spun on him, incredulous. "An assumption? About her? What assumption could I possibly be making?" The universe answered her with silence, a heavy, ominous silence that stretched too long, too tight, too thin. But she didn't hear it. "I mean, look at her," she said, gesturing dismissively at Zaya. "No badge, no appointment, no passcode. No business attire, not the professional kind, anyway. She waltzed in here like she owns the place, and we're supposed to just let that slide?" A gasp broke from the back row. The senior officer closed his eyes for half a second, as if bracing for impact. The trio in dark suits finally took a collective breath. Because the line had crossed. The mistake was complete. The consequence had been sealed. Zaya lifted her head slowly. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't pride. It was the quiet acknowledgement of what had to come next. Her voice, when it emerged, was soft, softer than the room deserved. "Is that truly what you believe?" she asked. The manager scoffed. "I don't believe I enforce." And you have exactly 10 seconds before she never finished. Because the trio stepped forward at once, forming a protective line around Zaya so seamlessly the entire atrium inhaled in unison. Phones dropped. Mouths fell open. Even the tickers above seemed to pause mid-scroll. Their leader spoke, voice crisp and unmistakably authoritative. "Miss Watkins, we're ready." The manager's face drained of color. "Ms. Who?" she whispered. But the answer was already unraveling in her mind. Piece by piece, memory by memory, the gold badges, the protocol alerts, the sudden presence of corporate oversight, the guard's hesitation, the senior officer's fear. And then, the truth hit her with the cold force of a falling market. The woman she had just humiliated, the woman she had threatened, dismissed, belittled was the one person in this building she should never have raised her voice at. The owner, the controller, the unseen architect, Zaya Watkins. And in that instant, The manager finally understood the full cost of her mistake. But it was far, far too late to undo it. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The atrium moments ago, buzzing with cruelty dressed as confidence, now stood suspended in a strange, brittle quiet. The revelation still hung in the air, half-formed, half-believed, waiting for someone brave enough or foolish enough to speak it aloud. But no one did, because everyone felt it. The narrative had shifted. The ground beneath their assumptions had cracked open. The trio of operatives stepped an inch closer to Zaya, a movement so synchronized, so deliberate, that several employees instinctively lowered their phones as if they'd been caught recording classified information. The manager finally found her voice thin, tremoring around the edges. "Wait, what's happening here? Why are you standing with her?" No one answered. Not the senior officer, who now looked like he was trying not to be sick. Not the guard, who had silently stepped back until his heels touched the wall. Not the analysts, who had stopped whispering entirely. Only Zaya moved. She lifted her briefcase, unlatched it with a soft metallic click, and removed a matte black device no larger than a smartphone. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't intimidating. But something about it made the air seem heavier, as if the object itself had authority. She tapped her thumb against the biometric pad. A single chime sounded quiet, precise, unmistakably final. On the mezzanine above, 2 more operatives appeared, tapping their earpieces in response. The manager flinched at the sound, fear darting across her features. What did you just do?" Zaya didn't look at her. Instead, she addressed the trio. "Status," their leader responded immediately. "All departments locked. Internal access restricted to your authorization only. Protocol is in full effect." A wave of whispers surged through the employees. "What protocol? Is this an audit?" "No, this is bigger. This is something else." The manager laughed a brittle, panicked sound. "You can't just walk in here and shut down departments. Who gave you?" Her voice faltered. The trio turned their eyes toward her in perfect unison. Zaya finally spoke. "I did." The simplicity of the words made them heavier, the kind of heavy that lands in the body before the mind catches up. Every employee in the atrium felt it. Even the building's hum seemed to bow under its weight. But this wasn't the real trigger. Not yet. Zaya lifted the device again, her thumb poised over one final confirmation pad, the one that activated full authority privileges throughout every satellite office, every financial branch, every transaction node tied to Meridian's network. "Miss Watkins," the operative said, "are you ready to proceed?" Ready. The word carried history. It carried 23 years of clawing her way upward in an industry that never wanted to see her succeed. It carried every moment she had been misjudged, underestimated, dismissed, and it carried the humiliation she'd just endured not because it hurt her, but because it revealed the rot she now had a responsibility to excise. Zaya looked at the manager at last. The woman stood frozen, mascara trembling on her lashes, her authority evaporating faster than she could cling to it. The smug senior officer beside her was pale. The guard swallowed hard, wishing he had never lifted a hand in her direction. Zaya's voice was calm, measured, dangerously controlled. 7 minutes ago, she said, you made a decision. She lifted the device, pressing her thumb to the last pad. And now I'm making mine. A soft pulse of white light blinked across the screen, tiny, understated, yet charged like a quiet explosion. Throughout the building, a cascade of automated alerts erupted in synchronized sequence. Access overridden, authority transferred, executive credentials revoked, immediate review, priority 1. Leadership status, suspended. The manager staggered back a step. What did you do?" The senior officer choked on his words. "Oh, God," she initiated a Tier 1 internal reset. The guard stared at the floor. But the employees, the dozens who watched, filmed, whispered, now understood the truth, spreading through the room like wildfire. The woman they'd been ordered to push out was the highest authority in the entire corporation. And the moment she pressed that button, the fate of everyone who had stood against her, every insult, every assumption, every abuse had been sealed. Now the reset had begun. The reset didn't arrive with chaos. It arrived with precision. A series of chimes rippled across the atrium, soft, synchronized, almost surgical, as every workstation, every tablet, every access panel in Meridian Financial flickered from its standard blue interface to a stark, unmistakable white screen. Employees stared in disbelief as the words "System Override" pulsed across their monitors like a heartbeat. Phones vibrated, emails vanished mid-draft. Doors leading to executive suites clicked shut with automated locks. Keycards failed simultaneously, emitting a chorus of soft denials. And yet, through all of it, Zaya stood still, calm at the center of a storm crafted by her own hand. The trio of operatives fanned out with silent professionalism, moving through the atrium with military discipline. They weren't frantic. They weren't aggressive. They were efficient. The kind of efficiency that came from training meant for moments far more critical than corporate misconduct. One addressed the senior officer first. "Mr. Halston," the operative said, voice neutral, "you are temporarily relieved of duty pending a Tier 1 review." The man stiffened. "What? On whose authority?" Zaya didn't even look at him. The operative answered plainly, "On hers." His jaw slackened. An analyst to the left whispered, "This can't be real." Another replied, "It's very real." Across the atrium, additional operatives stepped through the glass doors, badges glinting gold. Their movements sliced through the tension like blades. They separated into two teams, one heading toward the elevator banks, the other toward the offices overlooking the trading floor. Each action was deliberate. Each step was purposeful. Each directive unfolded like a sequence long rehearsed. The manager found her voice again, though it trembled. "Stop! Stop right now! You can't storm through my department like this." The one who manages. The operative nearest her tapped his tablet. A profile appeared on the screen. Paula Willis Roll, Floor Operations Manager. Status: suspended. Under investigation. Her words died instantly. The operative spoke with disarming politeness. "Miss Willis, you are required to stand down immediately. Your badge has been deactivated. You will be escorted for a formal statement shortly." Her face drained to porcelain. "Escorted? By whom?" "Compliance and Ethics Division. Tier 1. Tier 1. The words rang through the atrium like a cold prophecy. Only the highest level violations triggered Tier 1 protocol. It was used for embezzlement, fraud, hostile internal threats, never ever for one manager's misconduct. Until now. But this wasn't just misconduct. This was a cultural fault line exposed in front of the very person who had the power to redraw the foundations of the company. The guard attempted to step back quietly, hoping to fade behind the crowd. But an operative stopped him with a single gesture. "Officer Grady," the operative said, "you are also suspended pending review." He swallowed hard. I was following orders." Zaya spoke for the first time since triggering the system. "Following orders doesn't absolve responsibility," she said softly. "Not when those orders harm others." Her tone wasn't cruel. It was worse measured, revealing a standard far beyond corporate protocol. Employees shifted uneasily. The weight of her words landed like judgment. Screens across the atrium changed again. Leadership freeze activated, all executive privileges revoked. Review team arriving in 10 minutes. The analysts looked around anxiously. "Review team? You mean the Capitol auditors?" "No," someone whispered, voice trembling. "This is the Internal Integrity Unit, the one that reports directly to the Ownership Council." But ownership didn't have a council. Not anymore. It had Zaya. An operative approached her. "Miss Watkins, all requested divisions are secured. We await your final directive for Phase 2. Paula whimpered, voice cracking. "Phase 2? There's more?" Zaya finally turned her gaze toward her, not harshly, but with a quiet authority that felt heavier than anger. "Yes," she said. "There's accountability." Paula shook her head in disbelief, mascara trembling. "You can't do this. You don't have the right." Zaya stepped closer, her presence steady as a heartbeat. "I own the right," she said calmly, "and I own the responsibility." The room fell silent. The employees who had laughed earlier now stood completely still, phones lowered, expressions shifting from morbid curiosity to the sinking realization that they had witnessed something monumental the moment a corporation flipped upside down. Not through rage, but through a leader who refused to match cruelty with cruelty. Instead, she answered it with consequence, and the reset was only just beginning. The atrium no longer felt like a workplace. It felt like a tribunal. Every screen, every locked door, every blinking alert had become a silent witness to the moment the hierarchy inverted itself. The same employees who minutes ago snickered behind their phones now stood frozen, guilt flushing their faces. They weren't capturing the moment anymore, they were trapped in it. And at the center of the marble stage, Zaya finally stepped forward. Just once. Just enough. The shift in her posture was barely visible, but it altered the room's entire geometry. Power didn't need volume. It only needed clarity. And Zaya possessed it in a way the others had never seen. Not loud, not angry, but absolute. Paula, the manager, tried to reclaim even a thread of control. This is a misunderstanding, she stammered. You walked in without ID, without an appointment, without even... Without what? Zaya asked quietly. The softness of the question hit harder than any raised voice could. Everyone knew what Paula had meant. Everyone knew what shed implied. And now they saw it laid bare. Paula opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, but the words refused to form, because there was no explanation that wouldn't reveal the truth. She hadn't seen a trespasser. She hadn't seen a risk. She had seen someone she thought she could belittle. Zaya didn't push the point. She didn't need to. The senior officer, Halston, attempted to intervene next, desperate, sweating through his collar. Miss Watkins, if someone had informed us in advance, Zaya turned to him with a composure that made him shrink. If my presence required advance notice, she said, that would indicate a deeper problem, wouldn't it? He swallowed hard, unable to answer. The trio of operatives remained perfectly still, forming a line behind her, not shielding her, but signaling to everyone in the room exactly where authority resided. Employees near the back began murmuring, "She's really the owner? All this time? And we never knew? Oh my God, we tried to throw her out, not we, Paula." But guilt didn't distribute itself evenly. It dripped down like cold water, touching everyone who had stood by, watched, or laughed. One of the analysts, the same young woman who had lowered her phone earlier, stepped forward timidly. "Miss Watkins," she said, voice shaking, I'm sorry for how they treated you." Zaya looked at her, not unkindly. "I'm not here for apologies," she said. "I'm here for truth." Paula's breath hitched. Zaya continued, her voice calm, carrying across the atrium like a quiet verdict. "What happened today is not about me. It's about a pattern, a culture, a belief that certain people deserve access, dignity, respect, and others must earn it through someone else's approval." Paula's mascara streaked. Halston's eyes dropped to the floor. The guard folded his hands behind his back, trying not to tremble. "And the truth," Zaya said gently, "is revealed best when people think no one important is watching." The weight of the sentence settled like dust, soft but inescapable. Paula broke first. She stepped forward, hands shaking. "Please, Miss Watkins, I didn't know who you were. If I had known..." "That," Zaya said, "is the problem." The room exhaled all at once, a long, collective breath of realization, shame, and the dawning fear of consequences, because she was right. They would have treated her differently if they'd known who she was, and that truth exposed a rot deeper than any policy could hide. Paula's knees weakened. I didn't mean..." Her voice cracked. Another operative approached her with a tablet. "Miss Willis," he said evenly, "please prepare to be escorted to the review chamber." Paula collapsed into a horror-stricken whisper. "No, please. Not in front of everyone." Zaya met her eyes, unwavering. "You chose a public stage," she said softly. "Your accountability will match it." A ripple moved through the crowd. Not cheers, not fear, but respect. Respect born from watching a leader who didn't wield humiliation but delivered truth with precision. Zaya turned to the room. "This is your reversal," she said. "Not because I want it, but because you earned it." And, for the first time that day, no one could argue. The operatives closed in, not aggressive, just precise. Paula's badge dimmed red. Halston's followed. The guards, too. One by one, the system stripped them of the authority they had weaponized minutes earlier. Zaya didn't raise her voice. "Effective immediately," she said. "Your positions are terminated. A new culture begins today." The words were calm, but final. Above them, the screens shifted once more. Leadership restructure, active, and the entire floor understood. They hadn't just lost their jobs. They'd lost the right to stand in the room she owned. The atrium slowly exhaled as the operatives departed, leaving behind a silence that felt cleaner than the space had ever known. Zaya walked toward the exit without spectacle, each step steady, unhurried, a presence that didn't need applause to confirm its authority. Behind her, the screens shifted to a final message. Initiating Culture Reform Dignity First program activated a fund she created on the spot. A promise that what happened today would never happen again. Employees watched her go not with fear, but with a dawning understanding of who she truly was. Not just the owner, not just the power they had underestimated, but the kind of leader who answered cruelty with consequence and arrogance with accountability. As the doors closed behind her, the lesson settled over the floor like a quiet command. Respect isn't given to power, it's given to character.